Door barely shut when Dad shot. Didn't know they let dropouts in. Snickers around the table. I swallowed it, slid into the back. Later, my sister's husband leaned in. Where do you work? I gave the company name, steady voice, no flex. He blinked, checked me again like I'd grown a second head. Wait, you're my CEO? Chairs scraped, forks froze, and the room fell into that heavy, electric silence where even the clock sounded loud. I just smiled and said, nice to finally connect. On the record. Asterisk, my name's Leo. I'm 32 now, but this all went down last winter, right before Christmas. My sister, Mia, decided to host the annual family dinner at her place. Technically, it was hers and her husband Ben's house, but we all knew who paid for what. My family were not the warm and fuzzy type, you know? Growing up in that house meant learning to dodge sarcasm better than dodgeballs, and how to downplay any win so nobody thought you were bragging. My parents weren't overtly cruel. No broken bones, no empty pantries. But they were masters of the quiet chip away, piece by piece, consistently. Sometimes, I swear it would have been easier if they just screamed like normal dysfunctional parents. The big headline, the one they clung to, was that I dropped out of college at 20. Didn't matter that I left because the business I started in my dorm room suddenly exploded, and I couldn't manage it between midterms. Didn't matter that I sold that company 5 years later for an amount I still haven't fully processed. To them, I quit. I failed. I was the family's cautionary tale. Every time my name came up, it was followed by that long sigh, the one that said, imagine if he just stayed in school. I rarely went to these things. The last time I showed up for a holiday dinner, my mother asked if I was still figuring things out. This was right after I landed a major government contract. I remember staring at her across the table, fork midair, wondering if she genuinely didn't know or just didn't care. Either way, I stayed silent. It was easier that way, I'd learned. Less friction, less temptation to remind them who I really was. But this time, it felt different. Mia, my sister, personally called to invite me. She was always the peacemaker, trying to balance my brooding silence and our parents' performative judgment. She said she missed me, that it wasn't the same without me, that I should at least come for dessert. And this part really got me. She said my father had softened up, that he was trying. Against my better judgment, I said I'd think about it. The week rolled on, and I figured, asterisk, why not? Show your face, eat some pie, leave before anyone gets too nosy. Asterisk, I pulled into their driveway 10 minutes late, not enough to make a scene, but enough to miss the opening speeches. The lights inside glowed warm and golden. For a brief second, I almost believed this time would be different. But then the door creaked open, and my father saw me first. Didn't know they let dropouts in here. No hello, no smile. Just that. I could have left right then, gotten back in my car and driven away. But something inside me, a strange mix of curiosity and quiet defiance, made me stay. Maybe I wanted to see how far they'd go. Maybe I was just tired of running from people who never bothered to catch up. The dining room was packed. Long tables stretched wall to wall, draped in beige and gold decorations, the kind that screamed, "We only use this for company." Every seat was taken except for the one in the corner. I passed by cousins I hadn't seen in years, their kids glued to tablets. The smell of cinnamon and turkey was thick in the air. My mother barely glanced at me. "Oh, you came," she said, then turned back to her conversation about someone else's wedding. I sat quietly, observing. I'd gotten good at that over the years. My cousin, Noah, was talking loudly about his promotion at some insurance firm. His wife chimed in, practically reciting his resume. Everyone nodded, congratulated, toasted. I picked at the bread rolls. No one asked me anything, which honestly was a relief. Then, during the second round of wine, someone clinked their glass. Time for the family career check-in. Uncle Frank, years ago, started it and it stuck. Everyone would go around, give a quick update, promotions, new jobs, even firings. It was part of the ritual. The adults pretended it was lighthearted, but you could feel the tension build as it moved around the table. My turn came last. Mia tried to skip me, but Uncle Frank laughed. "What about Leo?" Still chasing the dream? I looked up from my drink. Yeah, I said. Still chasing. A few chuckles. My father smirked. That's when Mia's husband, Ben, leaned over. He's newer to the family, married Mia a few years back. Nice guy, corporate type. We'd never really talked. Where do you work anyway? He asked casually, like he wasn't expecting much. I paused, thought about lying, thought about saying consulting or something vague. But I was tired. Tired of minimizing. Tired of pretending. I told him the company name. He blinked, then looked me over like I'd just spoken fluent Mandarin. Wait, he said slowly, eyes narrowing. You're my CEO? The room went silent. I mean, dead silent. Forks stopped moving. Even the kids looked up, and that was the first time I realized. No one here knew. Not even Mia. I looked at Ben, deadpan. Yeah, small world. He laughed once, short and sharp. You're kidding. I wasn't. Silence stretched again. My father's face shifted. Confusion, then denial, then something harder to read. My mother blinked like she'd misheard. Uncle Frank cleared his throat. No one said a word. I reached for my glass, sipped once, and let the tension hang. But that was only the beginning. The second Ben pulled out his phone, fact-checked me under the table, and confirmed it. The dynamic of the room started to unravel. And trust me, I hadn't even gotten to dessert yet. Ben stared at me like he was trying to rewrite everything he thought he knew. The screen of his phone glowed beneath the table as he scrolled, no doubt checking the company website, maybe even our LinkedIn page. I didn't need to look. I knew what he'd find. My name was right there on the executive roster. CEO, co-founder. The title they'd all scoffed at, if they even knew it existed. He looked up again, face flushed, eyebrows raised like he was still processing. You're Leo Harrison, he muttered, just loud enough for Mia to hear. As in, that Leo Harrison? Mia turned toward him, confused. Wait, what are you talking about? I could feel every set of eyes on me now. All the cousins, the in-laws, even the second cousin's kids. Some were pretending to still eat. Most weren't even blinking. Ben gave a half laugh like he was still hoping I'd say I was joking. He owns the company I work for. Like the whole company. I've seen him in all-hands meetings, but I thought. He trailed off, clearly trying to reconcile the me sitting at the end of the table in a thrifted coat and scuffed boots with the polished executive voice he'd heard on conference calls. Mia blinked. Wait, you run that company? You never told me that. I shrugged. You never asked. She sat back slowly, absorbing it. Ben shook his head, and I could tell it was dawning on him that the awkward black sheep of his wife's family, who everyone barely acknowledged, was signing his paychecks. My father laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of joy or surprise. It was that dry, wheezy scoff he used when someone else's success made him uncomfortable. So what? You own some tech company. Doesn't mean you actually do anything. These days, everyone with a laptop thinks they're a CEO. There it was. The deflection. The dismissal. I'd seen it coming. I started it in my dorm, I said calmly. We went public last year. My mother finally joined in. Well, you certainly never brought it up before. You could have said something instead of letting everyone assume. Assume what? I asked, not bothering to hide the edge in my voice. That I was a burnout? That I failed? Silence. I didn't correct anyone because none of you ever asked. You decided who I was years ago, and anything that didn't fit that version just didn't exist. I hadn't planned to say that, but once it started coming out, I couldn't stop. My father set his fork down, his tone sharpening. Don't get dramatic. If we treated you differently, it's because you were different. You quit school. You stopped calling. You didn't want to be part of the family. No, I said, my voice steady. I just got tired of being treated like a joke. Like my path didn't count because it wasn't the one you chose. The energy in the room shifted. Mia looked down at her lap, visibly uncomfortable. A few ants exchanged glances. Ben was still staring at me like he'd just discovered a rare animal. But the moment didn't last. Uncle Frank jumped in, trying to smooth things over with a fake laugh. Well, hey, look at that. Maybe now you can buy us all a vacation. Huh? Since you're a big shot. A few people chuckled, relieved to break the tension. But it made something tighten in my chest, because that's always how it went. The second things got real, they turned it into a joke. Redirect, deflect, move on. Except this time, I didn't want to move on. I could, I said. But I won't. That got their attention. I'm not here to impress anyone. I came because Mia asked me to. But if all you're going to do is pretend this isn't a pattern, I'll save you the trouble next year. My father scoffed again. There he goes. Always so sensitive. And that's when it happened. The breaking point. Ben, still holding his phone, cleared his throat. Actually, I've got something to say. Everyone turned to him. I've been working under Leo's company for 3 years. He built it from the ground up. We had layoffs during the pandemic, and he personally made sure no one on my team lost their job. I didn't even know who he was at the time, but now that I do, I think this is the first time I've seen someone hide their success because of how their family would react. He turned to Mia. Babe, how did you not know? Mia looked like she was about to cry. He never talks about work. I thought he just did freelance stuff. That stung more than I expected. I didn't talk about it, I said quietly, because I didn't want to be accused of bragging again. My father snorted. You think we're the problem? You've always thought you were better than us. No, I said. I hoped you'd be proud of me. But eventually, I realized that wasn't going to happen. I stood up. Not dramatically, just enough to signal I was done being cornered at the kids' table while the adults played pretend. I've worked hard, I said. Really hard. But it's never been enough for this family. I could cure cancer, and you'd still say I should have gone back to college. My mother opened her mouth to respond, but I held up a hand. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not shrinking myself so you can feel comfortable. Then I turned to Mia. Thanks for inviting me, but I think I've stayed long enough. I grabbed my coat and headed toward the door, and that's when the betrayal came. Wait, Mia said. Her voice cracked. I turned. She was holding something behind her back. A small, wrapped box. I was going to give this to you later. It's from everyone. She handed it to me. I opened it. It was a book. A self-help book. Finding Success After Failure. How to Rebuild When You've Hit Rock Bottom. I stared at it, then looked up at her. You all picked this out together? She hesitated. It was Dad's idea, he said. Maybe it would help you get back on track. The room was silent again. Even Ben looked horrified. I didn't say anything. I didn't throw it. Didn't shout. I just set the book on the table, turned around, and walked out. And as the door closed behind me, I heard my father say, See? Can't even take a joke. That was the last time I spoke to any of them, at least for a while. But what they didn't know, what none of them realized, is that their words that night, the way they laughed, the gift. That was the moment something in me finally snapped. Because I wasn't the dropout anymore. I was their boss, their future landlord, their unacknowledged success story. And for once, I wasn't going to let that power go to waste. When I stepped out into the cold, I didn't feel powerful. I didn't feel smug or victorious or any of the things you'd imagine after dropping a truth bomb like that. I just felt hollow. The night air wrapped around me like a wet blanket, and I could still hear echoes of laughter and silverware clinking through the windows behind me. You'd think walking out like that, on your own terms, with your dignity intact, would feel like freedom. But it didn't. Not yet. It felt like walking out of a burning house, only to realize you'd left pieces of yourself inside. I sat in my car for a long time, engine running, fingers gripping the wheel. I thought about driving straight to the office. Thought about texting an old friend. Thought about Mia's face when she handed me that book. Like she genuinely thought it would help me. The thing is, when someone hands you a book titled Finding Success After Failure, it's not just a gag gift. It's a message, one wrapped in holiday paper and fake smiles. One that says, we don't see you. We don't hear you. We still think you failed. And I guess I believed them. Somewhere deep down, even after all the contracts and headlines and IPO celebrations, there was still that insecure kid sitting in the back row, desperate for a nod of approval that never came. That night, I didn't sleep. I paced my apartment, restless, replaying the entire dinner like a courtroom drama. The faces, the silence, the way my father said, "Can't even take a joke," like I was the one making things awkward. I thought about calling Mia, but what was there to say? "Thanks for the book, by the way." I thought about Ben, too. How quickly he went from disbelief to silence. Like once the novelty wore off, he remembered who I was supposed to be in the family hierarchy and adjusted accordingly. By morning, something in me had shifted. I didn't spiral exactly, but I withdrew. I stopped responding to emails that didn't need urgent answers. Stopped showing up for optional calls. I still ran the company, sure, but I started letting others take the spotlight. I delegated more. I started showing up in jeans and hoodies instead of the tailored blazers I used to wear like armor. People noticed, but no one said anything. I guess when you're the CEO, people assume you're always in control, even when you're unraveling. But I wasn't spiraling out of recklessness. I was shedding, peeling back layers I didn't realize I'd been wearing. I stopped going to the gym, started eating more takeout. Nights blurred into mornings, and I found myself rereading old journals, old pitch decks, even some of my college essays. Looking for the moment I became that guy, the one my parents could only describe with disappointment. And somewhere in that mess, I found something I'd forgotten. A letter. It was from my freshman year professor, printed out and folded into quarters. A response to an email I'd sent him right after I dropped out. Back then, I had written to apologize for wasting his time, for not seeing things through, for not being what he thought I could be. His reply had been short. "Leo, you're not a failure. You just outgrew the room." Scary, but that's not the same thing as quitting. Keep building. The rest will catch up eventually. I must have read that letter 5 times in a row. And on the 6th read, something inside me clicked. I hadn't failed. I'd evolved. My parents didn't want evolution. They wanted obedience, predictability, a version of success that looked like a framed degree, a cubicle, a mortgage by 30. They didn't know how to process someone who skipped all that and still came out ahead. I spent the next few weeks doing something I hadn't done in a long time. I unplugged. Not from the company. I still took key meetings and checked in with the execs. But from the noise, the expectations, the pressure to prove anything to anyone. I walked more. Explored bookstores I'd always passed by but never entered. Started journaling again, not in some performative self-care way, but honestly, messily. I even bought an old typewriter from a thrift store and banged out pages just for the sound of it. And slowly, the fog started to lift. I began mentoring a few young entrepreneurs in my spare time. Kids who reminded me of me. Smart, scrappy, and totally unsupported by the people closest to them. I didn't do it for clout or ego. I did it because I wanted someone else to hear, "You're not broken. You just don't fit the mold, and that's okay." One of them, a 19-year-old named Sam, had built a mobile app that was clunky and barely functional but had heart, real vision. I helped him polish the pitch, connected him with a few angel investors, and before I knew it, he'd raised his first round. Watching him succeed felt better than anything I'd done in months. That's when I realized something else. I wasn't just rebuilding my self-worth. I was redefining what success meant to me. It wasn't just headlines and revenue. It was legacy. It was being the person I needed when I was younger. It was building something that outlasted me. Not just a company, but a belief system, a model that didn't demand you conform to be worthy. Meanwhile, the family stayed silent. No calls, no texts. Mia sent one, "Hope you're well" message in mid-January, but I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because I was tired. Tired of being the only one doing the emotional labor. Then one day in February, something unexpected happened. I got a message from HR. Apparently, Ben had requested a transfer. Something about a conflict of interest and uncomfortable family dynamics. I didn't stop it. I didn't even respond. I let it pass through me like wind through a cracked window. But the timing was interesting because just 2 days after that, I got a certified letter in the mail. It was from my parents. More accurately, it was from their lawyer. They were selling their house, and they were offering me the first opportunity to buy it at a generous family rate before they listed it on the market. I laughed loud, Not because it was funny, but because it was so them. After all these years, after writing me off, belittling my every achievement, and handing me a self-help book over holiday dinner, their first real contact was a real estate offer. I didn't respond right away. I wanted to think not just about the house, but about what I wanted now. What felt like revenge 6 weeks ago didn't feel like that anymore. I wasn't interested in proving a point for the sake of pride, but I was interested in taking control of the narrative. I stared at that letter for a long time. Then I set it down, opened my laptop, and began drafting a different kind of response. Because the thing about rock bottom is not always a place of despair. Sometimes it's the foundation, the one you rebuild on, stronger, sharper, and more unshakably you than ever before. And that letter, that was the blueprint for what came next. But they had no idea what was coming. I didn't reply to the letter. Not at first. I folded it up and slid it into a drawer next to the rejection letters from colleges I never went to, an old bank statement from the month I hit 7 figures, and a faded photo of me at 16, standing stiffly in a wrinkled button-down at my sister's high school graduation while my father beamed behind her like she just solved world hunger. I stared at that drawer for a while. I wasn't angry, not anymore. Anger had burned off weeks ago. What was left now was something cooler, more focused, precise. I'd learned a long time ago that true power wasn't about shouting the loudest or slamming the most doors. It was about control, about showing people quietly, methodically, that the world didn't orbit around their approval. That house offer? It wasn't a peace offering. It was bait. My parents weren't sentimental. If they were, they would have called, would have asked me how I'd been since the dinner, maybe apologized, or at least pretended to. But this wasn't about reconnecting. It was about convenience and desperation. I did some digging. One of the perks of owning a company that specializes in financial software integration is access. Not illegal access, mind you, but connections, data, public records, real estate filings, trends. A few calls later, I had the full picture. Turns out my parents were broke. Not flatline bankrupt, but close. Their retirement fund had taken a hit during the last market dip, and my father, Mr. I worked hard for everything I have, had apparently refinanced the house to fund some investment opportunity 2 years ago. Some nonsense crypto startup run by a guy named Chad with frosted tips and a Shopify hoodie. It tanked. Now they were trying to sell the house before the bank started knocking, probably to avoid embarrassment. And their pitch to me as the first family buyer was more about skipping realtor fees than mending fences. It all clicked into place. The self-help book, the silence, the sudden need to reconnect via certified mail. They didn't want a relationship. They wanted a bailout. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just going to reject their offer. I was going to flip the entire dynamic on its head. I sat down that night and made a list. Not a petty list, not some burn-it-all-down revenge fantasy. This wasn't about rubbing anything in. It was about resetting the table. For once in my life, I was going to be the one pulling the strings. Step 1, buy the house. But not from them. Asterisk, I contacted the bank directly. Not through a third party, but through someone I'd met years ago at a fintech conference in Austin, a mid-level account manager who'd since been promoted to VP of lending. After a quick conversation, I learned the foreclosure was closer than my parents had let on. They were hoping to sell before the official notice hit, probably to avoid embarrassment. But I had a better idea. I made an offer to the bank. Quiet, all cash. Through a shell company I'd already set up years ago for property investments. Technically, it was an anonymous entity. No ties to the Harrison name. The bank was thrilled. I got the property for 20% below market value. No drama, no back and forth. Just business. Step 2. Set the stage. I didn't evict them. Not yet. That would have been obvious. Too fast. I needed them to feel safe, settled, believing they'd dodged a bullet and maybe even come out ahead. So I waited, watched, paid the utilities quietly, made sure the mail kept coming. From the outside, nothing changed. But behind the scenes, I was preparing. I hired a property manager, someone new to my circle, not connected to the company, who could play the role of representative for the new landlord. I gave her clear instructions. Asterisk, no rush on anything. Let the tenants enjoy their remaining lease. Just make sure they knew the house had been sold and would eventually be repurposed. Asterisk, when the letter came from the manager a month later, my mother called Mia in a panic. Mia texted me, "Leo, did you buy the house?" I ignored it. She sent another one the next day. Asterisk, Leo, they think you did. You didn't, right? Asterisk, I still didn't reply. Not because I was being cruel, but because I wanted them to sit with the uncertainty. To feel what I'd felt for years. Ignored, dismissed, out of the loop. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about balance. Step 3. Gather my allies. Ben quit his job. He didn't say why. Didn't have to. HR flagged it for me and I let it happen. But I did keep an eye on his next steps. Turns out he landed at a competitor. Small firm, underfunded, barely profitable. A few of their clients overlapped with ours. I made some calls. Not to sabotage him. I'm not that petty. But I wanted to understand the playing field. What I learned was interesting. Ben had pitched himself as an executive strategist at his new company, claiming years of experience managing high-level contracts, which wasn't technically a lie, but also wasn't entirely true. He'd used my company's name on his resume like it was a stepping stone he'd outgrown. No mention of the fact that he'd worked 2 rungs below the department head and had never once been in a room with me. That gave me leverage. I didn't use it. Not right away. I filed it away because Ben was just another symptom. The real target was the culture that created him. The family machine that churned out expectations and double standards like clockwork. Step 4. Build the new image. I started showing up again, to conferences, investor events, speaking panels. But this time, I didn't lead with tech. I led with values. I told stories about growing up in a family that measured success by degrees and job titles. About feeling like a failure even as my company grew. About what it meant to reclaim your narrative. The stories resonated. People leaned in. One panel at South by Southwest led to a podcast interview that led to a magazine feature. Suddenly, I wasn't just a tech guy. I was a story, a voice for the unconventional path. The dropout who didn't just win, but redefined winning. I knew the family saw it. I saw the breadcrumb trail. Mia's old college friend following me on Instagram. A cousin liking a photo from a keynote I gave. Even my father's LinkedIn account showed up in my "Who's Viewed Your Profile" tab. He never connected, of course, that would be admitting interest. But the message was clear. They were watching. Good. Let them. Step 5, the reinvite. By late March, I got another text from Mia. Asterisk, Leo, Dad's turning 65 in April. He wants a small dinner, just family. No drama. He asked me to invite you. Asterisk, I stared at the message for a while. This was it. The next move. The moment where the balance could tilt either way. I waited a few hours. Then I replied, "Me? Sure, I'll come. Let me know when and where." Simple. No snark, no conditions. Let them think I'd moved on. Let them believe the awkwardness was behind us. But behind the curtain, I was orchestrating the final act. Because if they thought the family dinner would be just another awkward gathering where I sat quietly in the corner while they danced around the truth, they had no idea what was coming. The table was set. The house was mine. The power had shifted. And I was done playing small. I arrived 5 minutes early. Not on purpose, really. I debated whether to show up fashionably late or not at all. But something told me being early was the better move. There's a power in being the first one at the table, especially when that table used to be one you weren't even properly invited to sit at. The birthday dinner was at a quiet little steakhouse downtown. The kind of place with white tablecloths, candlelight, and menus that didn't list prices. Mia had reserved a private room near the back. 12 seats, one long table. The same number of people who sat around that dining table at Christmas when they handed me a self-help book wrapped in red foil. Felt poetic. I wore a dark navy blazer. No tie, just polished enough to draw a line between who I used to be and who I'd become. I'd gotten a haircut that week, sharper than usual. Clean shave. New watch, a gift to myself, not for status but for symbolism. The inscription on the back read, "You built this." I didn't expect anyone at the table to notice. That wasn't the point. Mia arrived next. She gave me a tight-lipped smile and an awkward hug, the kind where you can feel all the words she wants to say but doesn't. I nodded, said, "Thanks for the invite," and took my seat. Then the rest trickled in. My mother with that ever-practiced smile. Uncle Frank already chuckling about some traffic joke. A couple of cousins I hadn't seen in months. And finally, my father walking in like he owned the place, ignoring me at first until we locked eyes. "Glad you could make it," he said. His tone was neutral, measured, almost careful. "I wouldn't miss it," I replied. Dinner started civilly enough. Small talk, the weather, Mia's kids. Someone brought up a new Netflix show. I let it wash over me. I wasn't there to engage in the usual banter. I was waiting. Timing mattered. Ben arrived late, looking sheepish. He gave me a quick nod and sat down next to Mia, fidgeting with his napkin. He hadn't made eye contact with me once since the day he quit. The waiter came to take our orders. Wine was poured, bread was passed. The night ambled on until the main courses arrived, and that's when I saw my window. My father had just cut into his steak when Mia stood up and cleared her throat. "Okay," she said, holding up a glass. "Before we dig in too much, I just wanted to say a quick toast. Dad, happy 65th. We all love you, and we hope this next chapter brings you peace, rest, and a whole lot of fishing." Light laughter, clinks of glasses, a few hears. Then it was his turn. My father wiped his mouth and stood, holding his wine. "Thanks, everyone," he began. "Really, I wasn't sure if we'd all be able to get together like this again, but I'm glad we did. Means a lot to see all of you here, especially you, Leo." He looked at me like he was trying to read a line off an invisible teleprompter. "I know things haven't always been perfect between us, but I've always wanted the best for you, even if I didn't always say it the right way." That caught a few looks. My mother even reached out and squeezed his wrist like she'd been waiting for him to say that for years. I gave a small nod. "Appreciate that." He sat back down. A few people clapped. Mia looked relieved. The wine was flowing freely by then, and people started relaxing into the evening. But I wasn't relaxed, because now it was my turn. I waited until dessert. The plates were cleared, and the waiter brought out a modest chocolate cake with 65 candles burning bright. There were pictures, singing, some awkward applause. Then, as forks dipped into slices, I stood. "Before we all head out," I said, raising my glass, "I'd like to share something too. Just a quick announcement." All heads turned toward me. I took my time. No rush, no nerves. Most of you know I've spent the last decade or so building my company. It's been a journey. Lots of ups and downs, late nights, and learning the hard way. But I'm proud of what it's become. And recently, I started exploring something new. Real estate. Some polite nods. I'm not talking flipping houses or anything. I'm building something more meaningful. A series of community projects, mixed-use developments, even a few legacy properties. I looked around the table, pausing just long enough to catch everyone's gaze. One of those properties came up for sale recently. It meant something to me, carried a lot of history, so I bought it. The room tensed. I could feel the shift. I turned to my father. "It was yours." He froze. I kept going. "I didn't buy it from you. I bought it from the bank. You were in pre-foreclosure. You probably thought you had more time, but your crypto guy, Chad, was it? Tanked faster than expected." His face drained of color. My mother's fork dropped onto her plate. I wasn't smiling. I wasn't gloating, just speaking, steady and measured, like reading a press release. "I've let you stay there these past few months. Covered the utilities. Didn't raise rent. Didn't kick you out. Wanted to make sure you were comfortable. But now that your lease is ending, things will change." "What? What are you saying?" My father's voice was low, sharp, defensive. "I'm saying you'll be getting a formal letter in the mail this week. You'll have 60 days to vacate. After that, the property will be converted into a startup incubator for underserved founders. It's part of the foundation I'm launching." My mother gasped. "You're evicting us." I looked at her, not with cruelty, but clarity. I'm reclaiming something that was never yours to weaponize. Silence. Dead. Thick silence. You could have called, she whispered. You could have believed in me, I replied, at any point in the last 12 years. But instead you mocked, dismissed, and when I finally showed up as more than what you expected, you handed me a book about failing better. So yeah, I bought the house, and I'm using it for something good. My father stood, face red. You think this makes you better than us? No, I said. It makes me free. Ben was staring at his plate. Mia looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. I took out a small envelope and slid it across the table toward her. What's this? She asked. Something for your kids. A scholarship fund. Fully paid tuition wherever they go. No strings. Just because I still love you. And I know you tried. Her eyes welled up. She didn't open it. My father's chair scraped loudly as he pushed it back. You've always been ungrateful. No, I said quietly. I've just stopped apologizing for existing on my own terms. He stormed out. My mother followed, muttering something about unbelievable arrogance. A few others stayed, stunned. Uncle Frank looked like he'd just watched a Shakespearean tragedy unfold in real time. I sat back down and picked up my wine. Mia looked at me. I didn't know it was that bad, she whispered. I nodded. That's because I stopped telling you when it started hurting. She said nothing for a long time, just stared at the envelope. Then finally, she leaned in and whispered, Thank you. I nodded again. By the time the check came, half the table had already cleared out. Only Mia and Ben remained. Ben still hadn't spoken. Not once. As I stood to leave, I placed a second envelope in front of him. He looked up. What's this? A choice, I said. Your new employer is about to be audited. They're not ready. You can stay, or you can jump ship and join a competitor I'm quietly funding. Higher salary, better fit, no family drama. It's your call. He opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. I didn't wait for a thank you. Didn't need one. I walked out into the night. The air crisp and clean. The sky stretched wide above me. There was no fanfare, no applause, just peace. And for the first time in years, I wasn't chasing anything. I was walking towards something entirely my own. I wasn't the dropout anymore. I was the legacy.